Melbourne today. I'm down at St Kilda Beach. Now, I know because I set this up in advance. I gave a 5-minute warning. There is one person watching this video. So if you're that one person, hello, it's a private one-to-one stream for you and me. Hopefully some more people will join us, but you never know. Now in today's video, as well as showing you the fact that Melbourne isn't always really sunny, it's actually cloudy and a little bit windy today. You'd almost say it was cold, but it's not really. It's still summer. It's still very pleasant, still very nice here. But yeah, it was 38, 39 degrees yesterday, so it was absolutely baking, over 100 degrees. Couldn't really go out. So hey Dave, Dave's just sent me a message. Nice to speak to you. Good to see you. Thank you for the 2 people who've joined. They've both given me a thumbs up. If you're joining, give me a thumbs up straight away. Hello from Iceland. Hello, hello. Right, I'm going to get straight into it. I'm not going to be one of those people who just reads out all of the comments. Now, as you can see, I'm stationary today. And the reason why I'm stationary is because I think there were some complaints last time that when I was walking, I didn't have the stabilization working properly on my camera. It's because I was doing it on my phone. I didn't have my gimbal with me. And gimbal isn't to be confused with GIMP. Completely separate things. So if you're thinking GIMP, don't think that, think gimbal. Anyway, the reason why I wanted to make this live stream today was to talk about what's going on in Cuba, because we've seen some really interesting developments over the past 24 hours, well, over the past few months, but particularly over the 24 hours. So if you've been following the situation in Cuba, you'll know that it is quite critical, mainly because the way that the country has been structured, it is totally and utterly dependent on oil. Because of the relationship historically with the Soviet Union back in the 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s, Cuba built up its electricity system to be fueled by oil. And the reason why it did that was because it had such a strong relationship with the Soviet Union because of its communist ideology. So Russia, or Soviet Union back in those days, was basically giving Cuba huge amounts of oil for free in exchange for things like doctors going over to Russia and various other rights, but mainly because the Soviet Union wanted the rest of the world to be communist. So Cuba built up a huge amount of power stations that were fueled by oil. And that worked fine until the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. And since that time, Cuba has been struggling. But it was saved predominantly because Venezuela was prepared to provide lots of oil in the same way as the Soviet Union had. I'm going to pull my glasses down because even though it's cloudy, it does actually feel still quite sunny. So protect your eyes, always very important. Hello, Colin from Australia. So Cuba then became dependent on Venezuela. But unfortunately, if you've been following the events of what's been happening in Venezuela, you'll know that Nicolas Maduro, who was the president, was deposed recently. Donald Trump sent in armed forces, removed him from his palace. He's now in prison in the USA. He's been replaced by his deputy. But Venezuela is now effectively under the control of the USA. So no more oil is going from Venezuela to Cuba. Donald Trump has specifically said that. Now, Cuba needs around 100,000 barrels of oil per day just to keep the lights on. That's how much it needs just to keep everybody in electricity. And it hasn't had 100,000 barrels for a long period of time. It was receiving around about 50,000 barrels per day from Venezuela. And then the other country that was giving it the most was Mexico. It was providing, in the last 4 months, it's provided around 17,000 barrels per day. So not enough to keep Cuba in electricity, but enough to just about keep the lights on for certain times of the day. And Cuba has been having planned blackouts. So if you're in one of the towns, you may get electricity for 4 or 5 hours if you're lucky in a day, and then the rest of the time it will be dark. Now, if you're running a business, that's an absolute disaster, because how can you actually do anything if you've only got 4 hours worth of electricity? Well, you could set up your own generator, but you'd obviously need fuel for that generator. And if you can't have any oil or whatever else, then you're not going to be able to get your generator to work. So there are some major problems already in Cuba. However, it's now been announced that Mexico is now considering switching off its supplies of oil. That isn't somebody I've paid, that's somebody who's going for a swim, even though it's quite cold. Not sure why you would. If you turn round, you can see the sea is quite choppy and it's pretty chilly just sitting here, but I wouldn't really fancy getting my Speedos on and diving in there. Anyway, I digress. So Cuba has now been threatened by the USA. Basically, Donald Trump, in a recent conversation with the president of Mexico, has said that he doesn't want to see oil going from Mexico to Cuba. Now, this is an interesting debate from Mexican point of view. Firstly, there's the humanitarian element of they're trying to help out one of their fellow neighbors. So that's the first point. But the second point, and I think this is quite an important one for Mexico, is that by giving Cuba oil, they're keeping the country ticking over a little bit, which is preventing an even bigger migration of people from Cuba. And a lot of those people who are leaving Cuba, we've seen a huge exodus over the past few years, are going to Mexico because that's one of the closest places to go to. You can land there, and then you can possibly make your way into the USA historically, but more difficult today because Donald Trump has closed a lot of the borders. So there's sort of a method in the madness from Mexico's point of view. It's not just because they want to help out. It's also probably saving them from having tens of thousands of migrants, additional migrants appearing from Cuba. However, Mexico is now concerned about the situation with regards to Donald Trump. They're worried about what happened in Venezuela, happening in in Mexico. Unlikely that it will happen in Mexico, but I guess there's a chance. So Mexico are cautious. Also, the USA is the biggest single trading partner for Mexico. So they need to make sure that the relationship stays strong. They've already been hit with tariffs as a result of the whole tariff regime. So Mexico's already struggling with regards to additional cost on all of their imports into the USA. So the last thing that they need is Donald Trump increasing those tariffs because Mexico is continuing to supply oil to Cuba. So there is now a really big chance that Mexico are going to switch off those exports of oil to Cuba. And if that happens, then Cuba's basically going to be out of oil because they're the last chance that Cuba had to keep the electricity flowing. And if you don't have any electricity, then the people in your country obviously are suffering, but so are all of your companies, and it just becomes an absolute nightmare because if you don't have any power, any fuel, you can't really do anything. That would be a total collapse. We've talked about collapses a lot on the channel, and if Cuba is starved of oil and therefore has to switch off its electricity power stations, then that means that everybody will be literally in 24 hours of darkness. You won't be able to put your own generator on because you won't have any fuel to fuel that. And that is basically going back to the dark ages, literally. So Cuba is now facing a complete and utter collapse. And this could be possibly the biggest humanitarian crisis that we've seen in living memory. And it isn't caused by natural disaster. It's not caused by floods or heat waves or famine or shortage of water. This would be caused by a shortage of power. So literally going back to where man started, you have to go back to basics. So I wanted to make this video really just to put everybody into the picture as to how serious the situation is now in Cuba. So what does this mean for Cuba, and why does Donald Trump want to starve the country of fuel? Well, he's already said that he thinks that Cuba will implode on its own. He doesn't need to do what happened in Venezuela. You don't need to send in troops to bring the country to its knees. It's already on the verge of collapse. And I think if it's starved of fuel, then that would force a total collapse. That's likely to see a regime change. Something needs to happen in Cuba to make things better. And realistically, their best option would be to reach out to their closest neighbor, which is the USA. Before Fidel Castro and the communist revolution, the USA was the biggest trading partner. Lots of US companies had set up businesses in Cuba. It was doing quite well. So there is a chance that Cuba could denounce all of its communist sort of ideology and go back to more of a capitalist Western culture and reach out to the USA. And we could see potentially what's happening in Venezuela happening in Cuba, where US companies could go in. There is some oil in Cuba, so they could help develop that. They could help build the infrastructure. Now, China has put a lot of money into Cuba over the last 20 years through their Belt and Road Initiative. They've been basically improving some of the infrastructure. They've put a lot of solar power into the country, but nowhere near enough. It's nowhere near self-sufficient. Now, China could lose access to a lot of that if the US does decide that it wants to reach out and help Cuba. But I think we would need to see total regime change, similar to what we're seeing in Venezuela, happening in Cuba. So that potentially could happen in 2026 because there's not many other people reaching out to help Cuba. I don't think Russia is going to do it. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Look at that, I've got some people waving in the background. Hello. There you go, people want to get on camera, crazy. So anyway, I wanted to make this video to just bring you up to speed as to what's happening, show you that it's not always sunny in Melbourne. I'm down here at St Kilda Beach. It is a cool place to be though. So even though the sun's not shining, it is still a nice place. I'm gonna have a walk along this promenade in a moment. It is great to get some fresh air, some sea breeze in the hair, just to basically see the world going by, just enjoy things. So thank you so much to everybody that's joined today. If you haven't given me a thumbs up, please give me a thumbs up already. I can see there's like 120 people watching at the moment. So if you could hit that thumbs up button, then that would be great. Let's see if we can get it up to 100 before I finish today. Hopefully you're enjoying these live streams because I wanted to make more of this sort of thing that, you know, it's just, life's too short to be sitting at home just basically making videos in a dark room and then posting them onto YouTube and then, you know, watching comments on your phone. Life's too short for that. You've got to get out and enjoy yourself before it's too late. So, you know, you just never know what's around the corner. So I think coming down here, I've really enjoyed it. I'm enjoying doing these live streams. Thank you so much to everybody that's joined live. I don't know what time it is where you are. I know it's morning time here, which means it's all sorts of times around the world. So yeah, somebody's saying to me there, Melbourne's going to be 42 degrees, which is like 110 on Tuesday. Yes, that's right. So in a couple of days' time, it's going to be baking hot again. I've had a fantastic time here in Melbourne. I'm making loads of videos on my food channel. So I went to a really interesting restaurant called Cookie last night. Anyone from Melbourne might know it. It's quite a famous Thai restaurant. And interestingly, halfway through the meal, before I had anything to eat, there was a fire alarm, so we had to evacuate. The fire brigade came. We had to go back in. They had to recook all of the food. First time that's ever happened to me. Quite interesting. So I'll be making that video some point soon. I'm almost up to 100 likes, not quite there. I don't know whether we're going to make it, but thanks to everybody that has hit that like button. But thank you so much for watching this video if you've joined live. Thank you also to anybody who's watching it recorded. I wanted to bring you up to speed on what's happening in Cuba. I think we're going to see some big things happening in Cuba in the next couple of weeks. It's possible we could see regime collapse. It's possible we could see humanitarian crisis, lack of food, lack of power, lack of everything. The USA may step in and change the government in the same way as has happened in Venezuela. Hey, somebody's just sent me a $5 something or other. Must be a live stream. Crazy Low. Hey, Crazy Low. Thank you very much. I know you, buddy. Thank you so much. That is very much appreciated. First time I've ever seen that. It comes up as a big green thing on the screen. So Crazy Low, thank you so much for that. Maybe we can get some more of those later in the week. I'm here until Wednesday, so I will try and do a live stream most days if I can. I've got a big day out tomorrow. I'm heading down to see the penguins down on their island, and I'm also going on the Puffing Billy train, which should be a bit of fun. I don't think I'll be doing a live stream from there, but you never know. So there you go. Somebody sent a WhatsApp that they saw me on the beach yesterday. So hey, thank you very much. So great. Thank you very much for everybody that's joined in today. We've got to 90 likes on the likes counter, so almost got to 191 now. So thank you so much to everyone that gave this a like. Hopefully you've enjoyed watching me live down here on the beach in the cloud. I'll give you another tour of the beach here. You can see there's not many people on the beach, not surprisingly, because it's not that hot. It's a little bit breezy, but it is still a cool place. Thank you so much to everybody that's joined in today. We've just gone over 100 likes. That is cool. Thank you so much to everybody. Hit that like button. If you haven't done so already, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and I will see you again on the next video.